I'm now joined by the Chief European Economist at Jefferies International, David Owen. David, thank you very much for coming to see us again today. First of all, what is your response to the Italian downgrade?
Well, I think the first thing to add is that this has been long expected. I mean, S&P had the sovereign on negative watch back in May, Moody's in June. They normally act within sort of 3 months or so. So we were expecting a downgrade at some point. Obviously, the surprise was it happened overnight. But having said that, a lot of investors, I think, were aware a downgrade was coming, and they were selling Italian bonds into any rally. And obviously, they were selling into the Eurosystem, in particular into the national central banks like the Bundesbank, as well as to the ECB.
OK, so the weighting was going down. They were underweight every time they had an opportunity to sell. Right.
I think I'd also add today we had some, slightly positive news on Greece, and so much that they paid a coupon.
Yes.
And obviously there's been this running concern in the markets that Greece was going to default today or tomorrow. Obviously they actually paid a coupon, so the markets obviously can put that aside for some time. OK,
so these are very short term.
Yes.
Particularly with Greece. When you see something like this downgrade, even though we knew it was coming, does it lead to more funding problems for banks generally?
Yes, and in particular if we get Moody's and Fitch following through, the issue then is the amount of collateral that banks may have to post if they're trying to get funding using Italian paper as collateral. And that means that financing become more difficult. Now, at the moment, the Italian banking sector hasn't been hugely reliant on the Eurosystem for financing. Just to put this in context, even though their funding has been going up through the Eurosystem, it only represents just over 2% of their balance sheet. In comparison, Irish and Greek banks have been rolling over about 20% of their balance sheet through the Eurosystem. Now, the issue here is whether we find the Italian figures keep rising, which may well happen.
And of course, a much bigger banking system, an awful lot more debt. Can I just ask you about, you mentioned the other two ratings agencies. Are you expecting that they will follow this lead now and downgrade?
Well, I think the issue here is that the rating agencies had Italy on negative watch even before all the recent financial stress. And the issue for Italy, of course, is that firstly bond yields have risen, and also monetary conditions on the back of that had tightened. Moreover, the sovereign, even though the market wants to see this, the sovereign has put in play a fiscal austerity package which tightens fiscal policy by 3.5 percentage points over the next 3 to 4 years. But this makes a recession in Italy more likely. So where do the rating agencies go? Well, it's very, very likely the others follow S&P's lead and do downgrade.
Now, if we see more pressure on the banks generally, does this put more pressure then, in turn, on the Bundesbank to try and increase liquidity? Yeah,
I mean, it's one of these, I think, misperceptions about who actually provides liquidity into the system. In particular, the lender of last resort is, at the moment, in large part, the Bundesbank. The Bundesbank supplying...
the ECB?
Well, yeah, they're all part of the same system, but it's the Bundesbank as the biggest central bank, which is providing more liquidity into the system. To put this in context, yesterday the Bundesbank announced that in August, their liquidity provision had risen to €425 billion, which is up almost €50 billion on the month. And just to put this in context, if we, for example, had a Greek default, which I don't expect to see happen in the next week or so, we'll see even more liquidity having to be pumped into the system. So what then happens to the Bundesbank's balance sheet? Does it rise to well over €1 trillion? And that's, something really worth considering.
So let's leave the Bundesbank to one side for a second and look at what's happening with the ECB. The bond buying programme, we clearly know that is necessary. It has to keep going at the moment.
Has to keep going. And again, the information provided by the Bundesbank yesterday showed that they had bought 22% of the paper, the Italian-Spanish paper, in August. So, it's going through the system, and generally, they're buying at the rate of 10, 15, maybe even €20 billion a week. And it's easy to see these bonds on the balance sheets of all the Eurosystem rising to €300 billion plus by the end of the year. Are
we in a situation where this is just not sustainable? The pressure on the Bundesbank and the ECB cannot keep building? Well,
they can make life easier for themselves. The first thing they should do is cut interest rates. It was a policy mistake to have raised rates in April, a policy mistake to raise rates in July. Hopefully, November the 3rd, Mario Draghi comes on board, they cut rates, and maybe 1% is not the floor for the refinancing rate for the ECB. They should think about bringing it all the way down to 0.5. There's no reason why they can't obviously continue buying bonds in size. And I think as the balance sheet of the Eurosystem, particularly the Bundesbank, gets bigger, they won't be able to sterilise this. So we'll have quantitative easing effectively through the back door. But I would expect to see that happen if this carries on. but they should make life easier for themselves by cutting the short rate right now.
And in terms of the Greek default, have you got any kind of time frame for when you expect the rescheduling to take place?
Well, the issue is if we've got a default, it wouldn't stop there, as we all know. I mean, the next thing people will discuss is, well, Greece is defaulted. What about them leaving EMU? So anyone with money in Greece would think about getting the money out. Moreover, people then start questioning the other peripheral countries, and so we'd have potentially deposit flight out of the periphery, and at that point the Bundesbank would have to really step up liquidity provision into the system. So I think at the end of the day it's easier just to continue backstopping it and just continue financing Greece for now. We all know it will have to restructure at some point, but not right now.
OK. David Owen, Chief Economist at Jefferies International, thank you so much for joining us.